Hey, I never get tired of the intro. That's awesome.
The joys of Clipchamp. Thank
Yeah.
you, Clipchamp. Thank you, Microsoft.
Okay, so welcome to episode 3 of our podcast from the MS EMS Community Discord. Uh, this is like a place for everyone to talk about latest tech and have a great time. And today we have a new face, and that is going to be Mark from Microsoft. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hello.
Nice to have you
So
here.
what are you
Can
doing?
you can you
Thank
tell me a
you.
little
Thanks
bit
for
about
having me.
can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so I am a product manager in the security customer experience team. So the team I'm on works with customers on their deployments of Azure Active Directory, and then we kind of take the learnings and feedbacks from those deployments and work it back into the product to make it easier and better for everybody else. So yes, I'm a member of this Discord. I'm a member of a few other Discords in Slack. So super happy to hear a lot of good conversation in that Discord. I know a lot of you guys are in Europe, and I'm in the mothership here in Seattle. So I wake up and I see like 50 questions and answers have come through. I try to help out where I can.
Yeah, I try to only highlight you when it's important, but I know
Right. When I get tagged,
you're active.
something specific is happening, or we'll say something is unclear in the documentation, or this person says this, but this other person says that. What do you think? So happy to help out.
Yeah, it's great to have you like in the server as well because it helps out all of us. Oh, okay, just a little bit of hiccups there. Okay, so we have James and we have Lewis. Hey,
Oh,
James.
Hello.
Hey. Okay, so our first subject for today is gonna be ADFS to Azure AD migration experiences from the wild. And I know, Mark, that's your hot topic right now, right?
This is continuing to be a hot topic. Yes. So
Yeah.
How many of you all have your environment, or you work with customers that still have ADFS? I'm curious.
I have a few
had a
that
couple
works in the
recently.
financial world. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I've got any that I can think of at the moment.
That's good. So what are some of the reasons why people still have it? Like, what are you guys hearing? What's
Legacy.
the community hearing?
Legacy.
What though? Is mindset or like tooling, or what's the issue?
It's usually just a hangover from an older time. It was done for a specific reason a number of years ago, and no one's necessarily sure why it's still there or what it's tied into. It's just it exists, and it occasionally causes a problem.
Mindset from my side as well.
They paid for a cybersecurity consultant many years ago and haven't paid for another one since.
Right. Yeah. So we've been, it's a really big thing that we've been trying to get people to move off of ADFS. There's a lot of things that I think people need to do if they are going to manage ADFS. Like, do you store your private keys in an HSM, and what's the uptime, and how do you manage all that? So one of the things we do is we do these workshops each month. They are free to sign up, and that's the link there on the screen. So they are time zone friendly. So we actually just did some this week here. So a lot of times I end up doing the ones in the Americas with Jeff Casimir and Jorge Lopez on my team. And we kind of break it up into 2 days. So the first day we kind of cover in the first like 45 minutes or so is kind of not only the high level overview of what the steps you need to take to move your apps and move off of ADFS, but also why you should do this. Because actually one of the things we see the most common is kind of what you guys are saying, is like it's this legacy mindset, right? That it's not broke, don't fix it, right? And it's not like actually, one of the golden rules of IT is like you want to be like everybody else, right? Like you don't want to be on this unique configuration. And actually, we talk about in the workshop that 80% of the tenants are actually using managed authentication. It's only 20% that are still federated. So if you are still federated, you are in that 20%. That continues to shrink every day. So we kind of go over that. We go over some things to kind of help you make the case to your leadership team and how we're going to go do this. And then basically the second half of day one, usually somebody will cover how to migrate your applications. So how do you translate some of those rules to conditional access policies? How do you update the application? All that kind of stuff. And then on the second day, we repeat that same introduction section of the why, because you can actually sign up for either day. And then we actually get into the weeds of how do you remove ADFS? Like how do you flip the authentication? Do you use stage rollout? How do you think about it if you have on-prem MFA? Like all that kind of stuff. We kind of walk through how does password hash sync work? Like all that kind of stuff. So these are free to anybody to join. we've had people join these, and then like I see them message me on Twitter. They're like, "Hey, I'm doing it this weekend." I'm like, "Okay,"
great.
and then like they did it. So I think a lot of people are just they don't know what to do sometimes. And
Yeah.
I'll be the first to admit that we haven't sometimes made things as easy as possible. So we've actually updated some of our documentation to be more clear. There's some newer videos. I can put that here in the chat here in a second. But they kind of show you like the last steps, like how do you actually, I got my people in stage rollout, everything looks good, but how do I get rid of ADFS? Like what are the things I need to do? So anyone, please join these, sign up for them. They're totally free. It's people like myself in the product group that will do this. And there's a lot of usually actually very good questions in the chat, like some of those types of things that maybe isn't the most clear in the documentation, or things you maybe don't want to open a support case for. Like, okay, well, I want to test, like, how do I test to make sure I'm still getting single sign-on to things within stage rollout? Like, can I do that? Is there a way for me to do that? And it's like, yeah, here's the steps you do. You make sure the device is hybrid Azure AD joined or Azure AD joined, all that kind of good stuff. We explain the PRT. We take a few minutes and explain that. So it's a really great thing. So if you're still at ADFS, we would recommend you migrate it.
I've actually mentioned it since you posted it first in the server. There was a couple of clients and just said, hey, there's this thing, sent them the link, and how far it goes beyond that, it's kind of up to them. But I'm not sure if you know that over here in the UK, the NCSC, one of the National Cybersecurity Council, a bit like, what was it? Just a bit like NIST, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Their recommendation is to use password hash sync, cloud-based,
Yes.
and to actually move away from it. So that's in their guidance, which
I do know that because we actually talk about that. We say like, hey, look, this is what these people say. The NSA also recommends it as well. So we kind of try to help you build that case, right? This isn't just you saying this isn't just Microsoft saying this. Here's these other sources as well that are recommending that, hey, if you have this set up, you really should look to move away from it.
People love to hear the name of a trusted framework, don't they? It's a bit of familiarity and marketing for it. If I was to play the role,
you, it's these people said we should do it, right? It's not just you.
Exactly, groupthink, and that's how a lot of IT stays and goes. If I was to play the role of a customer then who has ADFS, if I was to ask, how is it more secure to have the credentials fully managed in Azure AD versus the box I've got control of in my office? What do you normally? How do you challenge those objections?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, ADFS you should be treating this like a tier 0 resource, right? So you got to protect it the same way you protect your domain controllers as well as your Azure AD Connect or PTH and something like that. So so the way we kind of talk about that is, okay, so are you doing the right things to manage this in uptime and availability, and what is the cost of that to you? So that's like kind of the first thing. Then the second thing is, okay, well then how are you protecting the private keys and the certificates of that? Are you storing that in an HSM? A lot of customers don't, and they probably should, right? And then you start getting into, hey, have you looked at the risky IP report yet as part of ADFS Connect Health, and just to see all of the password sprays, all these things are just like bombarding your environment all the time that you may not even be looking at. And then you can start to get into like, what other things you should be doing with ADFS? Like, are you monitoring it for this? Like, what your governance policies look like around who's getting access to resources? Are you looking at metrics of things like, hey, we've assigned 500 licenses to this business unit, for Adobe Creative Suite, and now another business unit says they need it, right? They need also use Adobe Creative Suite. Should we go buy another 200 licenses, or can we actually look to see, hey, that group only uses about 100 of them, so we can reclaim that? Like all these types of things you can see in your environment. You can do that with ADFS, but it's a lot of work, a lot of manual stuff you can do. You can actually do that pretty straightforwardly and kind of natively in Azure AD. And then you have that kind of unified control plane, right? So you can do things like make sure conditional access policy is being applied to all the resources uniformly. You can do things like, how do you provision to these SaaS applications? You can use SCIM in Azure AD, right? So all these things, like maybe you're doing manually, we kind of call it in the workshop, and we talked about it before, we call it like the Timothy API, which is someone named Tim that like manually goes and like uploads the CSV file, or they're running a script to do it. You don't have to do it anymore. Like SCIM can do it. So you can sync, if a user can get hired, gets, HR system puts them either Azure AD directly or Active Directory, Azure AD Connect syncs them up. You have a dynamic group. It gets part of a group. They get the entitlement management stuff that's all set up, and we provision them over to Salesforce, and that all just happened. Like you didn't have to do anything as an admin. Like you can do all these types of things from like free yourself up. And we were talking about that kind of before the show started recording, but like you get to free yourself up to focus on more things that it like really can drive impact to the business, not so much like care and feeding of this system of like making sure it's up, patching it. I mean, all that type of stuff that you have to do, right? If that goes down, there's an issue. Like you have a big problem in your environment.
Yeah, it's really well summarized. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also it's a great way to like have Microsoft doing these workshops, like getting at the level with the customers. I know a lot of customers that I've been talked about, like they are fully supportive of you guys actually being open-minded to people now. Like not now, but you're doing a lot of effort to like get your customers, to get people that have actually paid for the subscriptions and etc. to get them on the call and hear about their issues.
It's super helpful for us too when we do this, because we hear this like it's good for us to talk to these people, right? Because like one of the things that we hear the most common is, hey, I want to do this, but I need help getting buy-in from leadership. That's really good information for us. So we don't need to keep making like the longest of the long tails to fix these crazy apps. We could spend more time trying to like, how do you make sure the IT pro can take that message back to the leadership team and say, hey, this is the reasons why. So that's why we spend like 30, 45 minutes kind of going over the process and giving that confidence that this is what you're going to do. And here's how you go make that case to your leadership team. So it's actually super valuable for us to get out there. And that's why some of us spend time in the community, Twitter, Discords, things like that, because it's really, really helpful for us to get that feedback from like the direct, hey, I want to do this, but I can't because you guys don't support this one thing. It's like, awesome. Well, we'll take that back.
One of the key things I also think about when you migrate to AAD is also the cloud intelligence, right? You get from it.
Yes. So one of the things sometimes people say, well, I get, security, all this kind of stuff, but like, okay, so you saw somebody log in incorrectly to your ADFS tenant. One IP came through. Is that a malicious user or not? You can't tell, right? It's just one. But we can see that IP hit multiple tenants. And then we can say, actually, this person is doing something suspicious. We can just start shunting them at the service level. Like you don't get that at an individual ADFS server because you can't see. It's just one bad login to you.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you get. Yeah, exactly. So tons of stuff there.
And Microsoft have an awful lot of telemetry across, all of the tenants that, globally, and that all goes into that type of thing.
Yeah, that's you might see called the Microsoft security graph and things like that. So we see all kinds of, this looks suspicious over here. This is confirmed suspicious. Then we can go backwards and forwards and all that kind of stuff with it. So yeah, it's really helpful.
What's the stat they often say? I don't think I can get through a Microsoft security presentation without them saying 65 trillion signals a day, which is an impressive number.
It's true, right?
It's a lot.
It's a good number. They have oversight on not just millions of cloud identities, but also owning the operating system and owning the Defender suite that sits on that operating system. They can anonymize and correlate the data and in theory have more security insight than any other vendor.
Yeah, I've sent through some of those presentations as well. I'm not sure where all those trillions of signals are coming from, but just even on identity space, just think about how many different Azure AD customers and MSA accounts, right? Those Microsoft accounts, the Xbox accounts, all that type of stuff. All that stuff goes into just the identity side, so it's extremely valuable.
Yeah, I mean, all you have to do is look at your sign-in logs and audit logs just in one, even a small tenant for one day, and then
One of the other things we talk about too in the workshop is making sure you have ADFS Connect Health installed. It tells you lots of great stuff that will help you do migrating the apps, but it will also help you when you look at your sign-in logs in Azure AD. You'll see one log view, right? You see your Azure AD logs and ADFS, so you don't have to keep bouncing back and forth between. So even if you're like, oh, I don't know when I'm going to get to this, just install Connect Health. It will show you all that stuff, plus really help you when you're doing those investigations.
Yeah, I've actually used that report. It's really good. And does it cost anything?
ADFS Connect Health, I believe you have to have so I'm not a licensing expert. I will caveat everything from licensing. But I believe you have to have at least a few P1 licenses. It's not like 1-to-1, but there's some, as long as you have P1, you should be, I think it's 25 per server or something like that. So you should be check the documentation, it's in there, but I think you need P1 for that.
Disclaimer, check documentation first.
Always check documentation and always consult with a licensing professional, which I am not.
Yeah, and that's
a whole other animal and discipline.
Do you think we could get one of those licensing professionals in our community? Don't see many of them around.
I mean, those people know what they're doing. I mean, that's if you got nothing to do, like you could probably make all kinds of money doing that stuff. Help answering licensing questions.
That's a shout out to the m55.com. No,
M365 Maps.
m55maps.com.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to that one.
Yeah, they have a whole they show you what you get with each license and all
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I've seen that's pretty good.
Amazing resource for anybody who just is interested in just the component parts of each, because he links to the relevant Microsoft docs for all the little bits as well. So it's super handy.
Yeah, it's a great little toolbox to have, or tool to have in your toolbox. The other thing you talked about, Mark, was the redesign of or redocumentation of the docs. So
Yes. So in the documentation, we've like updated some of it to be more clear about stuff. One of the things we did recently was some of the commandlets were the MSOL commandlets, which are the old commandlets. So we updated to the Microsoft Graph commandlets. We just recorded a video a few months ago, kind of showing you the final steps of how to actually get rid of ADFS. Like, okay, yeah, I feel good. What should I do? So we kind of walk you through these are the steps, and is myself and Ramiro in the studio recording that video and kind of showing that. So we include that in the documentation as well. So just trying to make this as much, I would say, self-service and like, especially for some customers that they're very smaller customers. Like there's 75 employees, right? There's 2 IT guys. They're either going to call an MSP, they're going to maybe call a partner. So the ADFS decommission guide. So we kind of walk you through like, what do you do after you, like, how do you get to that? How do you remove it? But then like, what do you need to do after you've removed it? So like, you need to clean up your certificates. There's some service accounts you need to clean up. There's something in the AD config container you need to delete. So all this is documented. We've kind of cleaned this up a little bit to make this more streamlined for everybody. So because if you're a smaller shop and you want to do this, but you just don't know where to start, like hopefully this kind of gets you pointed in the right direction, or you can work with one of the, I'm sure, many Microsoft partners in your area that will be happy to help you guys with this. I know some of you guys work in that space. So you helped your customers move off ADFS?
It's not a space that we specifically deal with, but just looking at that, you guys put together deployment plans, and with the sessions that you're running, I think a lot of it will be. There's a problem normally that if you're speaking to an EUC team, they're thinking about the devices or something, and people who deal with identities and Azure AD maybe a different team, and this siloed working thing becomes a bit of a problem. But we all need to work together more often.
I helped a few. But unfortunately they didn't have that many legacy applications. But I know when you came out with the pilot that you can like migrate some of your users for
Yes. Yeah. So previously, when you have to make the change, you'd have to cut it over at the domain level, right? So you change your domain name from being federated to managed. So that was everybody at once. And for some customers, that's too much change at once, especially maybe some of the larger customers. Like that's 500,000 users you're about to impact in one go. Are we sure this is going to work? So we came out with a feature called Stage Rollout, and we cover how to use this in the workshop. But you basically are able to put some users or groups into this thing called Stage Rollout, and then basically they will be using managed authentication. So they'll authenticate against Azure AD directly, but the domain will still say federated. So that's a way for you to test and validate that the experience is going to be what you want. Password hash things turned on. We're able to authenticate directly against Azure AD like we want. Everything looks good. Making sure, putting different users from different business units, making sure there's no application breakage and stuff like that. So that kind of helps give you confidence to kind of do that. So what people do is they put their users in there, they make sure everything looks good, then they schedule a cutover and they flip the domain from federated to managed, and then they're good to go. And then you kind of clean up ADFS after that, decommission it all the way out.
And that was like I think it's now like 5 years ago. I think that one came out.
I can't remember specifically when it came out, but like I definitely feel like there's things I remember that happened before COVID, because I remember like the meetings we were in and the building I used to work in, and that was definitely before COVID. So it's been over at least 3 years that's been out.
Yeah, and this is my mindset. Is like 5 years ago they came out, and I haven't I touched a couple of environments that still have ADFS, but like only a few. And that's also back to the if we keep in the identity space, also with the MFA. I saw a post on LinkedIn that not that many people are actually using MFA today. So
surprising
for
more
me.
people need to be using MFA, absolutely. But it's I remember, I think at 2017 or 2018 Ignite, I think it was number of admins that had MFA was like 0.07.
Yeah.
So less than 1% of admins had it. And then the year after that, we talked about it a lot. I remember we talked about it, kept telling people, you got to do this. And then the next year at Ignite, it was 1.7. So we went up 1%. It's been getting better since then, but yes, people still need to use, I mean, it's still seems very surprising how many people still do not have MFA turned on, especially using things like the Authenticator app, because the Authenticator app acts as a token broker on your mobile phone. So just like how you guys have hybrid Azure AD join or Azure AD join devices, and you get that primary refresh token, so you get less prompts. Having the Authenticator app as your MFA method on your phone, you will get less prompts on that device. So it's like a huge performance, like user experience benefit, like especially if you have long, complex passwords. It's nothing more frustrating than like typing that in multiple times on your phone. So getting Authenticator app on there is a huge win for that.
Yeah, I think MFA has been talked about so much.
It's insane. Like you
over
think
the
we
last
still doesn't
couple
have
of years.
this. But
Yeah,
it's
I
a
mean,
ton.
especially over COVID and working from home and remote, there were a lot of companies that had to quickly get their workforce from home remote, and so it was like MFA was the only thing they could do quickly to get more security. It is kind of crazy how there are so many people that don't have this as a basic requirement, and as IT providers, we should be enforcing it as a basic requirement for all customers, just on day one, no questions. If you don't want MFA, we don't want your business. Because the reason I say that is because if an account gets compromised, that's data gone. It's help desk time gone. It's troubleshooting. It's what have they stolen? Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of complexities for lacking such a basic security control.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And number matching, which was was it scheduled for February and then it got pushed back and it's now scheduled for like 2 weeks time?
I think so. I was saying before we start recording, I think sometimes the community is more in touch with the dates of things than sometimes I am, because there's so much change happening, and sometimes I'm focused on some very specific things that some of the other stuff like flies by me. But yeah, that sounds about right. So yeah, so number match. So the thing that sometimes happens is where the attacker, so the person has compromised someone's username and password, and then they get the MFA prompt, and the user just has to pick the 3 numbers. And sometimes people just pick one, or they keep getting prompts over and over again, and they just accept it, and then the attacker is able to sign in. So with number match, what actually happens is a number is showed on the place where the person has completed the sign-in, and then on the phone, you actually have to type the number in. Like you don't pick it, you have to like on the keypad have to pick.
You've got to see the screen, right?
Yeah,
that's what it's meant to do.
That's exactly what it's meant to do. Yeah. So it's a big help for that. But I'm just trying to get people to use MFA in general. But hopefully, yes, let's get them to number match, and then even better passwordless. Like if you're already at number match with Authenticator up on your phone, the jump to passwordless is even like it's just an enrollment part on the device. So it's really like that's like the next big step. You start getting into the phish resistant credentials and all that kind of fun stuff, like Hello for Business and 502 keys and stuff like
that. I've spoken to a number of clients who are well on board with Windows Hello for Business, and then you start speaking about wider or other passwordless mechanisms, and it's just like, oh, not ready for passwordless. It's like it's kind of what we're talking about, like you're already there. Did you have to kind of deal with that in a different way? Is it just a kind of mindset thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think what tends to happen when you say, okay, we're going to go to passwordless. So the first thing everyone thinks of is like, I got this system that's way in the back, and it's a mainframe, or it's an LDAP, or it's this old thing. I'm always going to have this thing's going to be around for another 5-10 years. Like I'm never going to get to passwordless. And that's like the wrong way to think about it. Like, yeah, getting to having 0 passwords in your environment is going to be a long journey. But you can start like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of good. Like getting people to Hello for Business, those information workers, like the one user to one machine. That happens with a bunch of things, right? So what you can do is, one, those people now should be getting less prompts, right? Because you're logging in with a strong credential at that point. So any of those conditional access policies that you have to say you have to do MFA, they shouldn't get prompted because you're able to meet that requirement doing strong authentication with that primary refresh token. So their experience is automatically going to be better. Great. Now they should be getting less prompts. More prompts you give people, that's more likely they are like, that's like phishing type of stuff. Like you're training people to give up their credentials. So now you should only be saying, hey, I'm getting only prompted for these specific applications. And you want to use that to start moving people in the right direction. And as things start to move to more SaaS-based applications and all that type of stuff, so like I'm on a Mac, and I've been passwordless at Microsoft since November 2020 because most of the applications I access are SaaS-based applications, Office 365, like all that type of stuff, right? So I can get to that pretty easily. So there might be pockets of your environment that don't need that LDAP app. Maybe they can get to passwordless, and like you can get to 20% and 40%. Like you continue to build that case, and then eventually you'll have to either upgrade that application, or you'll segment it off to something special, right? So I have some customers where they've already declared LDAP is considered legacy in their environment. So if you're a business unit that has an app that does LDAP, you have 2 years to modernize it, which can be either like you're going to do the work and you're going to do modern auth and OpenID Connect, all that good stuff, or maybe you're going to buy a SaaS app that does that. So they have 2 years to do that. Otherwise, they're going to get segmented off in this one problem number. And you just try it, nothing will happen quickly, right? But setting those right direction of policies and getting better where you can over time, that's how you get overall better, right? I don't have any customers that go, okay, tomorrow we're going to just do this big bang change. It never works that way. So got to start every new machine. They're going to get Hello for Business as part of the enrollment. So there's a new machine. They don't know any better. This is how it works. Okay, they complete it. They set it up. Okay, now they're Hello for Business. This is their new machine. It's how my new computer works. They don't know any different. And then you just work your way through that, right?
Yeah. Modern management, the modern management journey, and I think it puts a lot of people off, and you don't have to do it all in one, big bang, like you said. Doing it via attrition is fine. Do stuff, new devices go this new way, and I'm enjoying Microsoft's strengthening messaging on the AADJ versus hybrid thing. There's more
Little
stuff.
side note here. That is James' biggest topic.
Yes, because it's a massive thing in that move to modern, and there's so much misinformation about it. But what you were just saying about the kind of identity side, that's a journey as well, right? And and if you can link it in with everything else, it just makes it better for everybody.
Absolutely.
It's also a good prompt to make sure that you configure your Azure AD SSO where possible on all of the line of business apps that you're using. There are some vendors that charge extra for it, and they are listed on sso.tax. But it's advised that if you've got it, you may as well use it, because SSO behind CA is considered very secure.
Right. So this is where you can, that's one of the benefits of moving off of ADFS to Azure AD, right? You can apply those conditional access policies, and you can apply it consistently across your environment. And then you can even get to even more specific stuff where you can say, okay, this is a super sensitive information, crown jewel type of stuff. So I'm actually going to say, in order to get to this resource, not only do you have to come from a corporate device that's compliant, but you actually have to come from a phish-resistant credential. You have to meet AAL level 3 requirements to get to this resource, right? You can do all kinds of good stuff with that. And then when you start plugging in things like Azure AD App Proxy, you can start to apply those same types of security principles. What we want to make sure we're getting access to things to those on-prem resources as well, right? So App Proxy is good for those web-based applications, like integrated Windows auth, that kind of stuff. So you can get to that. But then we also let you partner, if you have F5 or Citrix or some of those things, those also can plug in. You get the same conditional access policies applied to those resources as well. So it's a huge benefit. Absolutely.
Can we actually put the ADFS to Azure AD migration in the same level as we do with Azure AD, hybrid Azure AD join to Azure AD join, in a
put them on this? What do you do them at the same time?
No, yeah, but in a migration thinking, because ADFS to Azure AD is the authentication, right? Identity primary, right?
It's a legacy to modern thing, right?
Yeah. From device management object kind of thinking to going from identity, combining those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I have several customers that I work with that they want to get rid of AD entirely. They want to just be only Azure AD. So how do you do that? So when you really think about it, it breaks into 3 things, right? It breaks into the users, breaks into devices, and it breaks into the applications, right? So users, that's the password stuff. Let's get the provisioning up there. All that, we'll figure that part out. Devices, Azure AD join modern management. So the sooner you can start saying every new machine is this way, then like you said, it's just attrition. And it's every 3, 4, 5 years, people, so they had something wrong with the machine, they got to pave it. They left the machine in the back of a taxi cab, they get a new machine, or they spilled coffee on it, whatever, right? All these different reasons that they could reimage the machine. The sooner you can get to that Azure AD join for every new machine going forward, the bigger benefit you're going to have. And then, yeah, the applications, that's always the longest journey, right? Like, how do you deal with that? So we kind of say, like, do you still need that application? Like, is it still being used in your environment? You have application inventory. Yes, we still need that. Okay. Then if it's a line of business application, is there a modern SaaS app equivalent that you can move to, right? So like sometimes people have their own, like the good example we always use is like the timekeeping stuff. So back in the day, someone wrote a timekeeping app. Chronos exists, right? Can Chronos meet the requirements? Like, do we need to spend time managing this, or can we just buy Chronos and now we do our timekeeping there? And then let's say, okay, no, we still need to do this. Then now becomes, how do you modernize that application? How do you use things like the MSAL libraries? Like, how do you do modern authentication on that application? And then if you can't, because for some reason we've lost the source code, it's whatever, the normal stories that you hear. Then that's where Azure AD Domain Services can come into play, where you like kind of lift and shift that resource, and then you need to front that with some sort of like VDI, like Azure Virtual Desktop or Windows 365 or something like that, to then get to that specific resource. But everything else is modern.
Well,
that's in a nutshell. That's like a decade plus project right there. I just said that that's.
What I typically also do with the devices, I also tell my customers to have any applications that requires a device to be a member of your on-premise AD, because most of the application only requires the password to match up the device coming in with the user on it to get extra access to this specific application.
So they're not doing like Kerberos, they're actually just doing like, as long as the password's the same, we let you through or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not great, but yeah, I mean, well, I guess that works, right? Kerberos is better for sure, but yeah.
The other bit I think along with that is the data, either user data or corporate data, and that seems to be the hardest one. Like, oh well, we've got so much stuff in file shares, and I think that is potentially a much bigger blocker because no one wants to dig through that, do the analysis.
Unstructured data, yeah, and it's just been there forever. And the date's the same date where they migrated to last time because nobody wanted to touch it. It's like
we see it every day in various Discords. We have the same discussions with people about this, and it's like, well, we want to go in-tune only devices, but we've got network shares that we can't move away from. We've got finance teams that use complex spreadsheets that have links to other spreadsheets. This conversation never ends, but it always goes quiet.
Yeah.
It's a struggle.
Problem for next year. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's tough.
Podcast.
Some of the stuff is tough. Yeah. I mean, some of this legacy stuff is very hard. Very hard. That's what I think, kind of back to the ADFS thing, that's good stuff to be spending time on. Like, how are you moving the business forward and be able to take on some of those modern things instead of spending time keeping those servers up, patching and that kind of stuff. Like, that's valuable time to like, how do we modernize this business and help my business be more agile, faster, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah. Identifying that total cost of ownership and actually being able to visualize that and say, well, you're spending this much time doing this. Like, sure, this project might take this long, but actually in the long run, it's yeah.
Shall we head on to the next topic? Because
oh my goodness,
let's.
What do you got?
We thought
it's 30 minutes just around ADFS. Modern.
Yeah, it's a great subject. Like, good job, Mark. By the way, you really put some highlights on how important it is and how to do it. Actually,
let's go. You guys get out there and help move. Any questions? Put them in the Discord. I'm happy to help answer, get you guys moving. But it can be done. Like, you can think about how many customers have moved. Like, you can do this too. If you're sitting there thinking, I don't know if I can do this, you can do this. Like, you can get it done.
Awesome. Okay, so next subject is gonna be. Do we have the screen on as well?
Yeah. What are we looking for? What's
the Windows LAPS management. Announcing
LAPS.
Windows LAPS management through Microsoft Intune.
Yeah. Let's go for this one.
I'm excited for you guys to talk about this. I'm aware of it, but I don't know. You guys have been digging in. I've been seeing the Discord, so I'm interested to learn here.
Yeah, actually, everyone's been pretty excited about it.
Personally, has only been like reading about the articles about it. I haven't actually tested in the wild yet. I'm unsure if you, James, or Lewis have. Maybe.
I played around with it the last couple of days. My personal view on it remains as it was, which is why do you need LAPS? It's definitely a use case. I'm hearing lots of people saying, oh, we need LAPS. And maybe the reason that they needed LAPS was to rejoin a device to the domain, and
Mm-hmm.
in a modern management journey, that's not a problem. So identifying the use cases, I think, is important, but it's definitely an important thing for some, mainly around like support processes, and how a support team actually interacts with the users and deals with the kind of BAU activities. And if there's more involved in kind of digging into why do we need LAPS than the time it would take to retrain your entire support desk on a new process, maybe it's just kind of worthwhile keeping the status quo for that one. But yeah, it was super simple to set up and really easy to use. So it's kind of exactly what you want from a thing that's integrated.
Yeah, I do like that they are also like focusing on Azure AD. Yeah, it is a cloud product, right? So, but I'm actually unsure how the use cases to find any use cases for it, because from the day I've been doing my cloud environments to now, I haven't like struggling to have this kind of product, to be honest.
I've dealt with plenty of customers that have not needed LAPS and dealt with local admins or not had any local admins on devices, and put applications into the company portal so users can self-service them instead of needing to if your support process is okay, we'll package the app for you rather, or make it available for you, rather than we'll log onto your device, we'll elevate, we'll download it, we'll install it for you. There's kind of maybe a trade-off there.
I know there is an argument for it. I mean, I wouldn't use the solution lightly. I think a lot of people will see LAPS as MSPs and go, oh, there's this new tool, let's push it out to everyone because it'd be really useful for our support teams. But I think if we were going least privilege, you should look at endpoint privilege management as a priority rather than LAPS. But obviously there are associated costs with EPM.
Yeah, yep. I agree on that one.
And shouldn't be taken lightly either.
No, definitely not. No.
An interesting thing that I've seen mentioned a lot over the last couple of days is around, and I spoke about it last night for another user group. Security frameworks. One of the long time standing things is disabling the built-in administrator account, and the LAPS uses that built-in account by default. You can get it to use a different one, but you have to create that account, and there's no easy way of doing that in Intune, so it kind of adds this extra thing. So this whole, well, do we go against the security framework that we're being held to, or put a bunch more work into it? And a lot of it seems a bit security via obscurity rather than actual tangible security benefit.
That is why, though, these frameworks should be used as guidelines for your internal policy, right? Who is asking you to conform to these frameworks? If you need it in the UK to get Cyber Essentials is if for people who aren't in the UK, it's a set of security baselines that a business can meet with their users' devices and servers and routers and switches and all things, just to meet some basic requirement to prove that they're at least thinking about security. If you need to meet that, that's fine. They're not the things that are enforcing what other frameworks might suggest, and it is a bit outdated. I mean, some of them even reference, I think it was you, James, last night that said Windows Server 2000 or above. Like that's the logic we're dealing with on these frameworks still.
That's obviously just the description that still exists from GPO, when it was originally created, and why would you need to change it? It has existed, but the point is that's reevaluating security frameworks is not something you can necessarily achieve, because there's quite a lot of businesses, especially in finance, or if you're trying to adhere to certain regulatory things, who just say, right, you need to be you need to achieve CIS, and if CIS are stating that you have to do that, it's rock hard place. What can you do? You either fail your insurance or suck it up.
I've seen that come up with some of the PCI stuff where you have to rotate the password every 90 days, and they're like, I'm passwordless, this is better, and it's like, nope, you're gonna fail your audit. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't like make any sense, right? So yeah, sometimes you have to kind of make those choices. And I think you kind of brought up the right point that I see people struggle with is, this is how we did it, so I need this equivalent in the cloud. It's like, maybe, like, what is the thing you're trying to achieve? And then do you even need this? So I think that's the right way to approach a lot of this stuff. Like with this Windows LAPS, I definitely had some of my customers said they have to do this until they couldn't go forward with Azure AD Join until they had that. But then like I have other ones that didn't need it and they're able to go forward because they're able to achieve it, what they're trying to do a different way. So I think that's the right approach. Like, what are you trying to get to? Not, I did it this exact way, I need this exact way in the cloud. Like, it's not the right way to approach it.
And that's the problem. It's familiarity. It's being comfortable with what you know, and adopting or changing the way of working is the mindset thing is always going to be the toughest part of any move into modern, be it in identity or devices or anything. I
mean, I see that with the devices where they say, "Oh no, the machines come into the warehouse and we get them up on the bench." Right, and then we image them this way, and it's like, no, you don't need to do it that way anymore, man. And it's like, no, this is how we do it. This is how we do it. It's like,
autopilot pre-provisioning, perfect example there. It's just like, okay, we've had guys build devices for ages, so this mindset is we need to keep them.
Get my image on there.
Get them,
my Goldmaster on there.
But like, autopilot doesn't do that. It's I'm gonna, before I stand up on my soapbox, I'm gonna stop.
But what I'm thinking is really funny about this, like you said about the passwordless, is like it's Windows local admin password solution, right? It's like keeping the mindset in the password stuff, right? So this only complicates things, I think, for a lot of people out there. But I will definitely look into EPM, and that's why I also made the joke about make EPM free, because
I'm not the right person to talk to make licensing requests to.
It was like an open letter, because
to anyone that Microsoft in the finance department that hears it, maybe they'll hear it, right?
Hopefully.
Things like EPM, their use cases, all of that new Intune suite stuff is, if you've got a valid reason, it's worthwhile looking at it and seeing why. But I think there are other ways of doing things like, have you got is it a really sticky application that like has this built-in updater and it has to run as the user because of app data? There are always use cases for these things, and they're not. It's easy to just discount them, but in a realistic world, like we do have to take those things into consideration. And those are the things that hold people up.
It's still a human problem, right? This whole move and this whole like redeployment of legacy, translating legacy solutions into the modern platform, familiarity. People are kind of scared to have their whole way of doing their career for the last 20 years challenged by a new technology, and it's a big shift. But go on, Mike, you were going to say something.
I mean, sometimes with that, it's like the reason people put up with these crazy apps that do these things is because they're super important to the business, right? Like IT is there to help run the business. Like we're not in the sake of doing IT for the IT sake. So so sometimes you have to do these goofy things because this is like one of my customers is in like this thing. It cost $1 million to buy the new version of this thing. So like, are we going to go buy a new thing just because it's modernized and spend $1 million, or like we're going to figure out a way to make this work? Like we're going to figure out a way to make this work, right? So like you got to keep in mind like what is the business need in there. But eventually, sometimes that you have to pay that cost, right? Like many years ago when I was a premier field engineer, I remember going somewhere that the core manufacturing line ran on DOS, and they would buy compact Presarios on eBay because they needed like the ISA daughter boards because that was the only way that they could keep this thing running or whatever. And I was like, that seems like a big risk to the business. Like eventually you're going to run out of ISA daughter boards, but eventually you're probably going to modernize that thing. But it's super expensive. Like that's what the entire factory ran on. Yeah, because it's old.
Just said a word I didn't have any clue about. So I'm
ISA daughter boards.
Yeah.
Really?
It's like a PCI. I mean, it's pre-PCI stuff. Like PCI, like I can't remember, but it was just like this very old thing that was like in these compacts. I remember.
Thanks for making me feel old. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, those ISO
Yeah.
boards.
Yeah.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
No, you're wee
I
baby.
didn't make it up, I swear. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. But yeah, we just made the natural switch to EPM, I guess. And then the next one we're gonna talk about is was it the macOS SSO, right, Mark?
Yeah. So for macOS, there's a functionality called the SSO extension, and basically what this does, it gets the Mac users as well as iOS and iPadOS. You get that same PRT-like experience that you get with your hybrid Azure AD Join or Azure AD Join users. So Mac users don't get that by default, so they're probably getting prompted more than you'd expect because they don't get that shared token broker experience. So the Enterprise SSO plugin, it went GA this week. So take a look at this. If you have some Macs in your environment, we have some updated documentation here that kind of walks you through how to deploy this. If you have Intune, it walks you through how to deploy this. If you have Jamf, which is another very popular MDM for Macs, and then we also have a generic, any MDM provider can push this configuration down to this. So this requires the company portal to be on the Mac, but it's a really nice experience. You end up getting less prompts for those Mac users. And I don't work with any customer that doesn't have at least some Mac users in their environment. So this is probably groups that have been ignored. So if you haven't heard of this yet, take a look at this. Super, super helpful. We actually, I can share a link here. We, myself and Michael Epping on my team here, we did a presentation around how this actually works. So we can, I'll throw this here in the chat. You guys can take a look. As well, if you want to get into the innards of it.
You obviously posted a link to a video about the ADFS stuff earlier on. We'll put the links in the in the YouTube details when we put up, and link to those other videos.
Yeah, this is super, super helpful. If you haven't looked at your Mac users yet, they're probably having a pretty poor experience. So do them a solid and push this out. It's their choice. Yeah, that's what happens, right? You pick the Mac, not me, right? But
can you tell a little bit about? Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking about. You said in the chat as well earlier about the PRT equivalent to this. Can you put the words on that?
So the PRT is the primary refresh token. So in basically there is a refresh. So a refresh token. There's a lot. We can get into a whole other topic on tokens, but basically, so there's an access token, which is the bearer token, which gives you access to a resource, right? The refresh token ties a user to an application, and then a session token, like is a cookie that ties a user to a browser session. Okay? So the refresh token. So if you have Outlook, you have a refresh token, and every hour it gets another access token to access Exchange Online. You have OneDrive, it also has a refresh token. Every hour it gets another access token for OneDrive. So you have 2 refresh tokens at that point. You have to keep logging into these different applications. So the primary refresh token acts as a token broker. So if you have a hybrid Azure AD Join device or an Azure AD Join device, basically they'll be able to share that refresh token. So when it can get more access tokens for the other applications without having to prompt the user basically so much. So the Mac gets prompted a lot by default unless you have a token broker on it. So you want to make sure you deploy the SSO extension for those users. Now I went super fast through that. Like we could do a whole hour on like how tokens work and stuff like that, but that's the gist of it. Like you will get less prompts when you have the primary refresh token.
In your experience, what are the most common things that kind of break that PRT refresh or authentication flows across?
What break? Well, people get too config happy. So they get like really in there and like this token should only be good for this one, but this app should be this one. Like it's very complicated because things like you're getting a token for the resource. So example of that, like Teams is a super good example of this because it touches lots of stuff, right? So it's touching like your calendar, like those jelly bean lighting things up, like the present stuff, that's getting requests to Exchange. So you can go, oh, for Exchange, I want the token to be only good for an hour. And then you're like, why am I getting prompted in Teams? Like this has nothing to do with it. I configured this for Exchange. Like it uses it, right? So it's people over prompt when they start to usually get in there and kind of fiddle around with some of these token lifetimes too much without quite understanding what they're doing. But if you just kind of use the defaults and the vanilla stuff, you should not be getting prompted that often. Like we only want to prompt people when it's truly needed, right? Like, so we're coming from a location we've never come before, where we don't need access to that sensitive resource. They're coming from a new device. Like, those are the reasons we want to prompt people and use those strong credentials when possible. We don't want to just prompt people for the sake of prompting them, right? Because when you prompt people 5, 6, 7 times a day, when the attacker goes to log in with that 9th time, they just approve the request because they just get, this is what this other workday is.
That's also the difference between a Mac and a Windows, right? So a Mac is not the main joint. It's only registry.
The Mac thing, so you can do a thing called binding to Active Directory, but actually Apple recommends you don't. So the Apple space, you're probably using a local account, like local to the Mac. And then there's like, you can sign in with Touch ID or a password, but if it's a fresh boot, you have to use a password. Like, Apple stuff is still very password, local account stuff still very strongly. But once you're signed into that, then you go access company resources. This is where the SSO extension will help you, because you'll sign in once. You'll do the authentication request. You can do passwordless. Like, I use Authenticator app for my stuff. I'm on a Mac, and that's it. I don't get prompted. Like, I open Exchange or open Teams, and then I'm good. Like, I do my authentication request. I'm good. Now I open Outlook, and I don't get prompted.
So just
which is what you get on Windows, right?
A real world deployment of this might look like you've got a Mac that's enrolled with Company Portal. You want to roll this out today. You push the extension because you've already got Company Portal installed and enrolled, and then it just takes the user affinity of Company Portal that's signed in.
Well, they'll have to get you have to prime it, right? So somewhere you have to sign in somewhere to get that. But yeah, once you're signed in, then you'll be good to go. So you have to either use Company Portal, you have to launch an app that's going to, like, often it's Azure AD or some sort of browser like Safari against OWA or something. Like, you have to go prime that thing. But yeah, once you authenticate once through, then you get the primary refresh token and you're good to go.
And
nice and simple.
All of those things then just essentially share that same token across the.
It's just like how hybrid Azure AD join works, right? Same thing.
I'm thinking about supervised devices, right? So when they come from the Apple Business Manager, they get deployed, they get registered inside Intune, so they know which tenant they are a part of to be deployed into. Will that also optimize the process of having a working ready device?
So there's more stuff coming around, I would say, call this like the SSO enrollment part of it. So we'll have more stuff to talk about that in the future, but this is not quite that.
Yeah,
now, you might be able to cut down prompts for like Jamf and things because you're configured for the Jamf. Like, you can configure also which apps and things like that you want to use. So once you sign in, you can use things, and you might be able to. But it's not quite the enrollment part. I know what you're getting at. It's not quite that yet.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I found in terms of an end user experience thing, which is just, it feels a bit bumpy. Like, even if you're going full ABM and supervised on a macOS device, there's always you've hit the desktop, but there's no that link between your account that you may have used, even if you've got federated ABM, but it hasn't transferred anything. You still have to log into the company portal then to actually get that thing. So yeah, looking forward to that in the future.
I think on iOS, the onboarding stuff is like really good right now. Yeah, it's so good. When we go back just a year back, it was hideous. Like, it's still hideous when you go from a personal device that wants to be compliant ready in Intune. It's still a hideous onboarding.
It's like there's a bunch of window flip-flopping, right? And it's it's there's work to be done there to help improve that experience for sure.
Yeah, but I could understand that it's probably also Mac or Apple that is like that needs to.
Oh, absolutely, right? Like, or like with Google, like with Android stuff, like it's both the IDP and the device provider need to work together and things like that. So we'll have some. I mean, I think some of the Intune blog has called out some of the direction that they're heading with trying to make some of that stuff easier. But yeah, as soon as we have something more to announce, we'll definitely throw it in the Discord and share it online and stuff like that. But we've heard the feedback, and we're working to make that better, hopefully.
Yeah, because this was the blog from July last year that initially announced the platform single sign-on stuff for macOS, and some of that additional stuff that we were talking about.
Yep, that's very exciting stuff. And then there's some of the enrollment stuff, I believe, in there as well.
Yeah, so some of this is already available because this was kind of 9 months ago, but the DDM stuff, and but more to come.
as I know some people might be thinking, is there any reason why you would not implement this solution?
The biggest reason people did not deploy the SSO extension was because it was not in GA. It was in public preview for a long time, and we had some stuff to get buttoned up, and it just went GA this week. So at this point, I can't. Is there any reason why you wouldn't hybrid Azure AD join your devices? Like, it's probably the same thing. So I don't really have. I haven't heard a good reason why. I mean, there's a lot of customers that deployed this, and a lot were just waiting. Like, they tested it with their 20 people in IT, and as soon as it went GA, they're going to roll out to the rest of their environment. So I don't think there's a really good reason not to.
That preview thing is a bit weird though, because aren't they still supported in production?
They are. The difference in the documentation says is there's basically no SLA for some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could definitely use it, and you can call support, and they'll help you best effort and all that kind of stuff. Like, you're fully supported and that kind of stuff, but it's just no SLA. But there's a lot of places they go, look, that's just our rule. Like, we don't deploy anything until it's GA.
Yeah, just fair.
I think it's great to see Microsoft putting some focus on the Apple world as well. And I know that Android world has been going like in triple speed ahead for some reason. But yeah, I think it's great to see, because in Denmark, Apple is a product that is like never gonna get old. Everyone uses it. I have a iOS phone as well. I know James and Lewis has an Android phone.
Yeah, I just ordered the Pixel 7 Pro actually.
I got both.
Yeah, both.
Yeah, one's for work, one's personal.
I mean, it should just be like, if that's what the business dictates that people need to use those devices, like, you should give them a good experience on it, right? And maybe there's things we can do better on Windows because of it's better together and there's more tools or something, and that's fine too, right? But I think if that's what they need, like, they've been, a lot of customers have really ignored this part of their business. It's the 20 people in art or whatever it is. But sometimes it's your executives, sometimes it's your developers, right? These are people that we should be protecting the most in the environment. And because they have a bad experience, the first step is we just say, okay, well, exclude them from conditional access policies then, because they're having this horrible experience of getting prompt information. Those are the people that we should be protecting, right? So I think it's worth definitely getting the SSO extension, making sure our conditional access policies are being applied to these devices and these users, and like, give them a good experience too. You can do it.
And that's why you need Azure AD as well to authenticate, to get all those conditions and bullets to actually require the wide access. Another experience I just had, just on the clock here, is that I just did on a macOS set up Defender for Endpoint. I don't know if you guys have tried that, but
yeah, we
that is
like quite a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. That is like with the P list, you have to like copy and paste. It's
it's more heavy on the management side, but once you get it working,
you can template it and then just copy it and just change the tenant specific associations, I found.
Yeah.
One of them is actually the onboarding package, and it will be tenant specific. But once it's rolled out, it's fine. I want to see the day where Intune is as good for macOS as it is for Windows. We want better reporting, and we want the ability to roll out applications through the macOS App Store through Intune. That would be a dream. At that point, I couldn't recommend Jamf.
That isn't that a bit like the Windows Store and the company portal in an enterprise environment, though? Isn't it a bit like you want people to go to the company portal, and it's taking that kind of agnosticism across platforms? So regardless if somebody's using a Windows device or an iOS device or a macOS device, they know to go to the company portal to download the apps. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that would work as well. Yeah.
Okay, guys. So on the end of this note, I know we went a quarter over agreed time. I'm sorry, Mark, if you have a meeting because you are actually at the office.
I can go a few more minutes, but yeah, I got to start wrapping it up for sure. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah. I have no question, actually. I think you answered all of them. I think you're doing a great job with the Mac world and also the ADFS to Azure AD. So thank you for that, and also thank you for you coming on here. It's been great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'll continue to hang out in the Discord and stuff. So if you have any questions around ADFS, especially, let me know. And it's not just me; we have a whole team of people working on this stuff. So I'm glad to see some of the stuff that we've been working on for some time start to see the light of day and really start helping improving the end user experience.
Yeah, really appreciate being here, being in Discord, and I'll keep on pointing people at the ADFS sessions that you're putting on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll drop now. You guys can keep on going.
Excellent. Thanks for
Okay.
having me, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
folks.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Ciao.
So we should probably just end it up right now, guys. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah.